Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and today I am coming to you from Florida, Fort Pierce, Florida, and this will definitely be a very different episode than I've done in the past. I can tell you that this is not an episode that I'm looking forward in doing, but I'm still going to do it because I feel like number one, I do want people to know a little bit about the story of my mom, and I also want to remember this experience for myself because I've just been surrounded by angels this entire time. And just to think about like some of the occurrences, there's been these miracles, this serendipity, these occurrences, just these things that are extremely not normal that have been happening. And I can tell you that I feel that, I don't know if the people listening, if you believe in angels, you believe in, the afterlife, you believe in God, you believe in any of that, but I do. And I hope to see my mother again in heaven one day. So thinking about like what happened for those that have not been maybe following some of the stories or don't know exactly what I'm talking about. So there was going to be a big hurricane in Florida, and there was some unexpected tornadoes that that hit Fort Pierce and the Spanish Lakes area. And unfortunately, my mother was one of the casualties of those tornadoes. So super unexpected. We weren't, obviously, when do you expect something like that happening? But still in the middle of this. I'm recording this a couple of days into having moved her out of her home, and all of that stuff that has to take place. We're in the middle of funeral arrangements and otherwise, and everything was coming pretty quickly. But I want to talk about some of the good here and about some of the things that let me know and the signs that I've received to know that, my mom's okay, and she's sending us her love, and that she really is okay, and that she's gone to hopefully a better place. So first thing, just a little bit of backstory about my mom. So she was one of those people that, I mean, to say she was the life of the party would be kind of an understatement. She was the party. She always brought the fun. I remember even as a kid, like friends coming over, things like that. I have friends that they'd never believe me that when I'd say that, you're going to like my mom more than me, and it's okay. And people did. And it was funny because she always was the life of the party, and it made it easier for me growing up, and even in my adult life, just to kind of tell my friends, hang out with my mom, it'll be okay. And take the pressure off of me. And she just had fun. She was a true people person. And she, in her professional background, she was a social worker for over 40 years, working with at-risk youth and in Southwest Detroit, and really just other areas of Detroit overall. And growing up in that type of environment and in that type of household, I did have the insight to seeing a lot of, people that had harder lives than myself. And that wasn't always easy, but I can say that it definitely gave me a different perspective in the world. And it allowed me, I believe, in many parts, to be able to do what I do, and to be able to communicate with a lot of different people. So if you can imagine growing up with a social worker for a mother, for anybody else out there that's had that experience, not always easy. There's a lot of talking. We do a lot of talking, but we do a lot of communicating too, our emotions, our feelings, our thoughts. And it did allow me to have that ability to communicate, and hopefully to do what I do now and do today. So that's just a little bit of backstory of my mother for those that didn't know her and that are listening to this maybe for the first time. Also, just a quick note, I did an interview, depending on where you're listening to or watching this. I did do the last time that I came out to Florida, I had the privilege of doing my kind of like final interview, or doing my mother's last interview. I didn't know it was at the time. And if you do happen to listen to that interview or catch that interview, I talk at the end of the interview, which is, it just sucks, obviously, but I talk at the end of the interview about how much fun we had, and we are making plans for bringing her back on the show at least once a month, maybe once a quarter, but I just wanted more stories. I wanted more fun. I wanted more, I just wanted to hear more about her life, really. Obviously, that's not going to happen anymore, but I will say that I'm glad. I do feel fortunate and privileged that I was able to get that last interview in with her. And at around the minute 20 mark, I won't say prophetic, but I will say it was kind of interesting to hear her words on disaster. She mentions in that particular interview, disasters are going to come, things are going to happen, people are going to, pass, and that's okay. Almost like she was giving permission for, what was going to happen next in her own life somehow, if that's even possible. But at least we kind of can know, and I know what her views were on that overall. And I have it in her words and her video and her thoughts on it, like direct from the source. So that does that's something that's special to me. I also did find an interview that I did with her way back in 2016. I think this is the first time I interviewed my mom, and it was kind of fun to watch that one again. I actually never released that interview, so that interview will be released in the near future, or depending when you're listening to this, it probably will already be released. But I'm gonna have my team edit that, and I want it to be out there so that others can hear her words. And in that, I think she gives a lot of tips and a lot of motivation on what it's like to connect with people, especially with youth, and she talks a lot about her life, and I think that's kind of special to commemorate as well. So that'll be released. So we have at least one more interview from my mom being released along with the other one. And in this particular episode, I wanted to talk a little bit about what's taken place here and just some of these insane miracles that have happened, and that I feel have been given to me as closure, but I think also through my platform and being able to tell this story, I hope that first off, my family that will listen to this, my aunts, her loved sisters, and all the grandkids or whoever happens to listen to this, the cousins, I hope that this gives them a little bit of comfort or solace to know that she's okay. She's sending signs, she's okay. And I also hope that this inspires others to look at the signs that are coming in their life from loved ones or from other things, and not to take those signs or those whatever we want to call it, that inspiration, those miracles, not to take them for granted in our lives. They're special, they're there, and sometimes in life it's really easy just to move forward and just keep going and going and going, and to be on that treadmill of achievement or taking care of your kids or your family or whatever it is that you do that keeps you going and that keeps you away from having a moment to pause and to stop and to recognize the blessings that are around us, and to recognize, the beautiful gift of life that we've all been given, while we're on this planet and while we're on this earth. So I hope that does that for you as well. Well, let me go a little bit into, and I'm going to try my best to do this chronologically, but just to let you know, it's a little jumbled, and this is all of this has happened within, let's say, the stories I'm about to tell have happened for the most part within the last 72 hours or so, or the last 3 days or so. So that being said, they're pretty fresh in my mind, and I've actually, what inspired this was the moments of clarity and the miracles and the things that were coming. They were just coming so fast that I just couldn't believe it. And you'll see what I mean as I kind of go through some of the things that have taken place. And I wanted to make sure that this was documented. So the first thing is, when I think about the fact that my mom was, a social worker, so think of it as somebody that dedicated their life to the community, other things like that. Like, this isn't usually the type of thing that makes national news when they pass. Like, it's just not. And some of the things that I just find pretty miraculous was when I first got the news. It was literally quite because somebody shared with me the news and also shared with me an article. So of course the coverage was being done all over the place, and obviously she was a part of that coverage. And so some of the features was she was in the New York Times. They did an article about her, and I just had to smile on this one because I'm like a little old lady, from Southwest Detroit makes the New York Times. Like, that's, first off, that's amazing, and thank you for the New York Times for commemorating my mother and her life. But then I look at the picture that they chose to her on a motorcycle. Come on, that was just one of those things where I'm like, my mom, she always knew how to make an entrance. Quick side story, I was, to give you an example of what I mean by she always knew how to make an entrance. I used to take my mom to like things that most people don't take their moms to, like professional events. I take her into my offices, wherever I was at, and I could fit her in, I would take her. So one of my good friends, Christopher Kai, had a conference that was happening in Miami, and this is a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, I don't know. A Gifters X Talks, and she comes into town, and she speaking of making an entrance, she walks into the room, and I let him know ahead of time, hey, my mom's coming. So as soon as she walks in, he sees her and stops the conference, and he literally just gives her a shout out and says, oh, everyone, Adam's mom is here, and everybody turned around and clapped. And her being her, did not miss a beat. She wasn't going to be like, she wasn't going to be shy, and she definitely wasn't going to seem embarrassed. Instead, she raised her hand, and she started doing like a princess wave and saying, okay, you can be seated. You can be seated now, as if as if the queen has arrived. And that's just the way she was. Like, she was going to walk in and she was going to own it. Nothing was ever going to throw her. So she knew how to make an entrance. So when I think about, her exit, and really, I mean, what other way could you go? I've never known anyone that has gone by a tornado. And then from there, of course, she would be in the New York Times as one of the unfortunate victims that did get taken by a tornado. But I like to think of it as that was her grand exit. If she didn't want to be, she would tell me for years, she didn't want to be, she didn't want to grow old to the point to where she was in a hospital bed and needed machines or couldn't like move or things like that. She would tell me that for years she never wanted to. So when you think about like her wishes, and if she could have planned an exit, I would argue an exit by tornado. Now, obviously, for me and all of those that loved her, we're not happy about this, and we are for our own selfish reasons. But she was a pretty sick lady. She had her own medical conditions. She had Crohn's and some other things going on, Crohn's disease and some other things going on. So in just logically speaking, she probably did go out at the height of her physical health. It was probably only going to continue to deteriorate from here on in. So she kind of went out on top, and number one, and number two, she went out in a tornado. She made national news, and not only did she make national news with like the New York Times and international news, which I'll talk about that in a moment, but before that, she even went viral with a CBS video, CBS Morning News. And what was interesting to me about this video was that the only reason why they were staying at that home, the home that was actually, taken by the tornado and ultimately where she met her demise, the only reason why they were at that home was because of the dogs. They wanted to take care of the dogs, and they were about the dogs. So because of the dogs. So, a little while after all of this other news is happening, they find the dogs. And I'm like, wait a minute, the dogs survived. Not only did the dogs survive, but they went viral, and and that news article went viral, and that ended up being a source of, hope for people that were going through this tragedy, and that ended up being a source of something that could make people smile, which is something that my mother was all about. Like, no matter how bad things are, no matter how bad it gets, to be able to smile, to be able to laugh, to be able to enjoy life even through diversity. And that's something that my mom was all about. She definitely didn't have an easy life, but she taught us all who are all those that were fortunate enough to be around her. She taught us all how to laugh. She taught us all how to enjoy the surroundings and enjoy the moment, even if we didn't know, it wasn't always the best circumstances. So that was another one. So just a quick recap: New York Times article. Her the dogs they survived. They went viral. And another quick story about the dogs, and just this didn't happen in this exact order, but this just actually happened very recently. But it's a good point in time to bring this up, considering I'm talking about the dogs. So my goddaughter Mireya, and she's studying to be a veterinarian in St. Kitts. And yesterday, so right now, from when I'm recording this, I should say yesterday, she texts her dad, Roger, who was with me, and she tells him that we won't believe it, that she's in class in St. Kitts. And they showed some video of some of the, like, what happens, I think, with cats or other things like that during the hurricane and all of that stuff. And then the professor plays in her class the video, the CBS video, or the CBS coverage of my mom and of the dogs and that whole story that came up. So here she is, like, receiving, in my opinion, a message in the middle of St. Kitts, and just, some love from my mom, and a little bit of reaching out, and a little bit of something that could even make her smile during this, troubling time. So this source of laughter or happiness that's come to so many, even through that, it was just something else. Another story, and I think this is one of the ones that kind of caught me from the beginning when I was thinking about my mom. And Rosava told me, so my cousin Rosava, she did an interview for Telemundo. I don't speak fluent Spanish, so when I talked to the reporter, I'm like, yeah, you should definitely interview my cousin Rosava, because she does. And because we definitely wanted to commemorate my mom and her memory, and they did a story on her. And here's the first sign I'll submit. While they were doing the interview, a bird, so they're outside, a bird comes and flies down and starts chirping, but like loud, like to where they couldn't even hear each other, and interrupted the entire interview. And Rasava says the first thing she says is she didn't flinch, she didn't skip a beat. She says, "Oh, that's my aunt. She's with us. She's got to have the last word. Like, she's got to be here. She's got to, of course, it's her. So she's, and the bird just kept on chirping and chirping. Where Sava told me that, I'm like, of course, that would be my mom, and that's what she would do. Just knowing that she's there and letting us know she's safe and that she's okay, and that she ain't going anywhere. She's looking over us. So that was one, and then that happened a couple days before I flew out of Los Angeles to come to Florida. So then when I got here, the first thing I did, of course, the normal stuff. I go, whatever. I go to get a rental car, and this is where the first kind of like thing hit me, where I'm like, okay, that's strange. Like, these things don't normally happen usually. So the first thing I do is I go to the rental car guy, and mind you, like, I didn't tell the rental car guy anything. I'm obviously not going to tell people like why I'm here and all of that. Like, that's kind of not the way I would operate. And so I go to get the rental, and I paid for like the regular, like, economy, whatever, like compact or mid-size, whatever car. And I pay for it, and then I go to check out. And when I get to the desk, the guy looks at me, and he just kind of says, I got a surprise for you. And I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Like, that's kind of weird. I never really heard a rental guy like tell me, hey, I got a surprise for you. And this was kind of like an obscure rental car company, or I shouldn't say obscure, but it's not like anyone that I've used before. I'm not a member. I don't have rewards with them, nothing like that. So this guy doesn't know me from anybody. So I go and I'm asking him, okay, well, what's the surprise? He says, I got you an upgrade. And I'm like, okay, thank you. So I go outside and he gets me like a brand new Mustang drop top, all of that. So probably their most premium vehicle that they have on the entire lot, and with no additional charge. So I don't know about anybody listening to this, but to me, that's a miracle. I've never that's never happened in my life where I get a premium. To me, that's divine. To me, that's my mom saying, all right, Adam, I got you. All right, you're going to be doing some driving, and I want to make sure you're feeling good. And so to me, that was the first sign from my mom where I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. And for those of you that are listening to this that are like, oh, okay, guy, well, I've got a free upgrade before too. Just keep on listening, because these miracles, I'm not going to say they build, but they're insane. So keep on listening, and that's just a little taste of what's to come. But again, I got a whole list of them. I had to make a list, and on the final evening I was here, I sat down with Roger and Rasava, and we were just having the conversation and trying to figure out how many of these crazy things happened, or these signs that were sent to us that happened, and there were so many that I was kind of forgetting them. So again, the first one, we'll just call it the rental car free upgrade, whatever. Apparently, I'm like, hey, Mom, if you're listening to this, keep the upgrades coming. I'm all right with that too. All right, if you're listening from above. So that's the first thing that happened. Now I drive from West Palm Beach, I think Palm Beach area, to my mom's, which I go to where all this took place in her retirement community, and where and just driving. The first thing I did when I wanted to come here was obviously I have to take care of all the things that you have to take care of, but I also wanted to see where it happened. And in driving through that community, it was kind of an eerie feeling, because you look, and when you drive in there, it's a pretty big place. So some areas, they're just beautiful. Nothing's happened. You would have never known if you weren't watching the news, or if you didn't know what took place, you wouldn't even know that there was tornadoes. You wouldn't know anything happened. Except for when you're kind of going into the community, you can see cars that were overturned. There was a church that was damaged and the roof kind of half blown off, and a bunch of other devastation there. But once you get into the community, it looks like a beautiful golf course community. But then once you make the turn down the street where she was at, it was bad. It was bad. It looks like if you can just picture walking through a war zone of just kind of devastation of homes. The home that she was in, which when I get to maybe miracle number 8 or 9, I'm going to do a little bit more of a detail on that one. So stick around, but it'll be a little bit towards the end, because that one's probably one of the biggest miracles that happened, actually. But I'll let you be the judge of that. In my opinion, that was something else. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But getting back to what it looked like, the home, everything, it looked like somebody just kind of crushed a box of I don't know, matches or something like that. It looked like a matchbox or a stick box that was just kind of crushed down, and just debris everywhere. And this is, by the way, a couple of days after they'd already done some cleanup. So they'd already cleaned it up a bit, and I got an opportunity to talk to the neighbor, who the neighbor was, during the tornado, he was in his car, in the carport that was in between my the home that she was in, and then his home. So they kind of were right next door neighbors there in that particular home, and he was in the car. He was in a car in the carport, and he saw everything just happen. And it was just, when I think about, the tornado was such a direct hit. It was Mother Nature or God or however, like literally targeted that house. The houses around, they were still standing. They had damage, of course, but they were standing. But it's like what that home that she was in, it definitely took the direct force, like the full force of that tornado, which we obviously know what the aftermath of that was. So after seeing that, I was able to recover a couple of items of hers that were in her car, which is totaled, of course, and her Moose Lodge biker kind of like jacket, which if you think about my mom on the back of a motorcycle or anything like that, like a lot of these things happen later in her life, and I was very happy that she was able to have her, another version of her life when she moved to Florida and meet more friends to kind of build on those friends that she'd already had that were lifelong friends in Detroit and Mexico and really scattered all around the world. She reached so many people. So really all around the world, she had friends is what it came down to. So that first day was tough. It was tough, like going into the home and seeing all of her stuff there. And speaking of her home, so the home that she was in was maybe 0.6 miles away from her actual home. And there was kind of, a little bit of mixed feelings for me here, because it's like, even though it's hard to argue with an act of God. I mean, getting mad with God doesn't usually do too much for you. I found, I don't know, maybe you have a different experience, but I find that that's a one-way conversation. So going back to her home, which is 0.6 miles away from the home she was in during the devastation, when I pulled up to her home, I didn't know what I was going to find. I thought there'd be damage. I didn't know if it was I knew it was standing, but I didn't know if there'd be damage or anything else. And what was kind of insane to me is that, like, there was, I would argue, 0% damage. In fact, there were these little planters out front with these like very small, fragile looking plants, like starter plants, and just like, little, I don't know, gardening stuff. And that stuff was still there. And it not only was it still there, but it wasn't knocked over, it wasn't harmed, it wasn't, so there was literally 0% damage in her home. So if she had stayed home, if she hadn't been taking care of that other home and the dogs and everything else, then she'd still be here. But again, that's a big if, right? But her home and everything, I mean, it was no damage. If she would have just stayed home, it would have been, obviously that was God's plan otherwise. Because God also had some other plans for some other individuals that were actually with her in there. So there was one of her friends, Carmen, that was with her in that home, maybe 20 minutes before it happened, according to her. And my mom was telling her, "Hey, Carmen, stay, stay, ride it out, like hang out with us." And she said, "No, I'm going home, and you should too." Carmen left, and Carmen is still with us. And just for clarification for anybody that's listening to this, I do have an Aunt Carmen as well. And that's not who I'm talking about. She also had a friend in Florida named Carmen, and that's who I'm talking about with this particular story. Aunt Carmen was nice and safe in Michigan when this took place. So getting back to the story, the Carmen, was one of the people that kind of, let's just say, was not meant to, go through this. Another friend was her really good friend, Mona was out here, and she had come with my mom back here, and she wasn't supposed to leave, to my recollection, until Saturday, which would have been a couple of days after all of this took place. And she instead decided to go. She says she wasn't going to be in town for the hurricane. It didn't really make sense. So that was another, life that was potentially saved there. Who knows? Mona might have been in that house too. So I bring up these stories because, well, number one, I'm glad that Mona's here, obviously still with us, thank God, and Carmen, that she's still around, of course. But it was just God's plan. Like, some lives were supposed to go and some were not at that particular time. So it's hard for me to grapple with, but There's just really clear evidence that so many decisions went into what led to this final result. So that was the homes, and just a little bit about those that as I mentioned, I'll be talking a little bit more about the homes too later when we a little bit more of a detailed account when we get to that particular miracle. But I want to get back to the miracles now as we go through the narrative of what took place. So after that day, as you can imagine, I was pretty beat. It's a long, long day. I flew overnight, so I took a red eye, and I wanted to the reason I did that was because I wanted to get there before maybe the bulldozers came and they started clearing stuff away to see if I could, salvage any of my mom's personal items that she would have, to see what was there through the rubble. So after that, I book a hotel. Shout out to Hotels Tonight. They're not sponsoring this, obviously, but that's one of my just quick tips. If you're going into a town last minute, Hotels Tonight, they give you some deals. So first thing is I get a really nice deal. That's not the miracle, by the way, but I get a good deal on Hotels Tonight, and they and like half price at this Marriott, which was insane. And here was the problem. So I finally go to leave, and then I realize I booked a hotel an hour away from my mom's place by accident. I didn't remember what city I was in. I thought I was in Palm Beach, West Palm Beach. No, that's where I flew into. So yeah, big error there. Been known to do that one before, and so now I'm driving to this hotel. I'm tired. I'm kind of beat, and I'm just on the phone making some phone calls, and I finally get. And I'm just thinking to myself, and I always find like when I really question myself, I normally get signs, or I normally get something, and this is even outside of my mom in this particular scenario, but I always just have this belief that my physical body is exactly where it's supposed to be. And I don't mean like the big higher level, like, are you with the right person, or are you in the right job, or things like that. I mean, just on the very basic human level of my physical body. Like right now, I'm recording this from a parking lot on my way to the airport to fly back to Los Angeles. And right now I believe that I was supposed to do that here. So that's what I mean. On the very basic level, my body is where it's supposed to be. And so I get to the hotel, and I'm like, man, I messed up. I'm an hour further from my mom, and I have to drive an hour back and forth for the next couple of days. Like, this was silly, but I already paid for it. It's done. So I'm really questioning myself, and I'm really kind of going inside, and I'm like, I messed up, right? So I get in, I check in, everything's good, whatever. And then here's the sign. And here's the part where I'm like, come on, like, are you kidding me? Like, thank you, Mom. So I forgot to eat dinner, basically. So I hadn't eaten in a long time because I read a lot of nerves, a lot of, everything going fast. And then now I have this hour-long drive. I'm in the middle of Florida and have no idea where I'm at. I'm not familiar with the area. So I check in, and I notice that, behind the Marriott desk to the right, there is like a snack shop. And, the self-serve kind that you just pick up a couple of items and then you pay for them at the hotel checkout desk, or check-in, checkout desk, whatever. So I grabbed, I would say maybe $30-$40 worth of snacks. First off, they had all my favorite snacks. We had some cheese crisps, we had jerky, we had like Diet Pepsi or Diet Coke, I forget which one. And just like, I loaded up. I had a legit $30 to $40 worth of snacks. So my hands are pretty full. So I'm holding like a handful of like an insane amount of snacks. And I go to the front desk guy, and it's pretty empty. Like, nobody's there. It's just me and him. And I'm like, all right, yep. It's like, here you go. And I put everything on there, and he just looks at me and he says, "You're good." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "You're okay." And he waves me off. And I'm like, wow, thank you, Mom. Like, I don't know about anybody listening to this, but I have never in my entire life loaded up on snacks at a hotel, went to pay for them, and the person that was checking me out just to say, "Nope, you're good. You could go." He says, "Enjoy your night, enjoy your stay." And just to throw this out there, I didn't tell him why I was in Florida. He didn't know anything about my mom. He didn't know anything about my situation. So just like the car rental guy, where I get this, I mean, premium vehicle, probably the best car they have at their basic economy level, midsize, whatever, like economy car, and they don't know me and he just does it. You could, if something like that happens in your life, like, and then now I come to this hotel and I get all these snacks and everything else. I'm like, that's my second one. That's another, or my third probably, like sign. It's like, thanks, Mom. You hooked it up with some snacks too. So Mom, if you're listening from up above, keep the upgrades coming, keep the free snacks coming, the free food. Like, it's okay. Keep taking care of your boy down here. I'm in, okay? Keep on sending those signs. I'm all right with it. But that was just cool. So that was like affirmation. I'm supposed to be staying in this hotel. I'm okay. I'm safe. It's an hour away for a reason. I don't need to know why. Maybe it's the phone calls I'm going to have on the way there and back. Maybe it's something else. Maybe by me staying here versus somewhere else, I avoided something that wasn't going to be pleasant. I don't know, but I don't usually go that far mentally into looking into it. I just kind of accept the blessing and the sign. The only reason I'm kind of like explaining that thought process is for those that are listening that maybe have good things happen to themselves and don't know how to deal with it, or how to pause and how to recognize that sometimes in adversity, like in this case, me being an hour away when I didn't have to be. I passed probably 50 hotels on the way to this hotel minimum on the freeway. If I'm maybe 30, 50 hotels on the way. But I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And how do I know? Because I got all those free snacks, and I know I was safe, and I know I hadn't eaten, and I know my mom's still taking care of me from above. So that was the next one. So I'm to continue the story with the miracles kind of sparsed in between as they happen somewhat chronologically, unless I get mixed up. The next day, it was time to kind of start dealing with, FEMA, all the paperwork, the funeral stuff, like all the other stuff that goes into it. And for anybody that's kind of gone through that in the past, they know it can be, pretty tricky. But I went through, and for everybody that, will attend the funeral and all the other things, I'll say this. My mom didn't want people to be very, obviously that she knew people would be sad when she wasn't with us, but ultimately, I have story after story about, and all of her friends, her sisters, everybody about, one funny one I'll tell you, was, who told me this one? I got to remember, which I'm probably going to confuse who said it. So if who told me this story is listening and I attribute it to the wrong aunt, forgive me. I'm doing this in the middle of everything. So, that's who it was. I do remember. It was my Aunt Doris, I think it was. And it was either Aunt Doris or Aunt Debbie. I don't remember which one. I got a lot of aunts, a lot of aunts. So they were telling me yeah, your mom, I know she wanted to be cremated. That was the main thing. She definitely wanted to be cremated. She didn't really care. She's like, you could put me in that table leg over there and and just, it's fine, whatever. But what she did want is she wanted her party. She wanted her party. She wanted people to laugh. She wanted people to smile. She wanted people to remember the good times, all the laughs they had in her life, and all the memories they made together. So that's what we're going to do. There's going to be actually 2 days of parties. I just kind of updated the schedule, and day one will be, we'll do, of course, the normal viewing and all of that stuff. And then we'll go day one to Abix Bar, and we're going to, celebrate my mom's life there after the viewing, and, have some drinks, have some food, that kind of thing. And then the next day will be an even bigger celebration. We'll do another viewing, and then this one we're gonna rent a hall, and there'll be just a club and DJ. There'll be a DJ. There'll be mariachis. There's just going to be a big old party, great food, all kinds of things. So having it all catered. So my mom wanted one party. I'm going to up it a little bit, and we're going to give her 2 parties for her going away. Which is still hard. It's still hard, but she's getting 2 parties. All right, let's get back to the narrative. Okay, so So the next day I drive back to the hotel, normal thing. Then I'm driving back to my mom's home, and now it's time to start, getting everything together. We're continuing down the path, and this is gonna be a hard day. Like, and when I'm driving in, I already know it's gonna be an insane hard day, because we were literally going to, the day before we'd been packing stuff up, and now this was the day that it's like time to go to work. Like, it's time to start hauling stuff and start lifting stuff and start donating stuff to Goodwill, and like throwing out stuff that doesn't make sense, and like that, the whole thing. So I know it's going to be a tough day. So on my way in, this wasn't planned. This wasn't anything. I'm supposed to meet Roger, and on my way in, I'm thinking, I'm leaving the hotel, and my intention when I left the hotel was that I would get a breakfast sandwich from the hotel, like I did the day before. I was like, oh, let me grab something. This will be quick. Then we can get started. On my way but I couldn't, there was nobody at the front desk. And I mean, I was sitting there for quite some time, and I couldn't get anybody's attention. So it was really early, by the way. This is probably like, I don't know, 6 a.m. or something. So it's very early at this point. And so maybe they took a break, or who knows. But it's definitely, or they were doing something else. But so I couldn't get anybody's attention to get my breakfast sandwich. So I was just like, you know what, forget it. I'm just going to go. So I'm driving in, and I'm probably 30 minutes into my drive, my hour drive. Remember, I'm still going back and forth. So maybe 30 minutes into my drive, and I think, oh man, this is going to be a long day. This is going to be like a 15, 17-hour day. Because I have to fly back to California the next day. So and I need to get everything done like today in one day. And so I essentially call, on my way in, I call Roger when I'm maybe like 15 minutes out, and I'm like, you know what, Roger, we're going to have a long day. We should grab breakfast. Like, we should eat something so that we have energy. So he says, okay, let's do it. And then so Rasava goes, and she gets on her phone, and she finds us, and she calls me back, and she says, okay, Adam, I have a Cracker Barrel. And then she named another cafe, and I was like, well, let's go to the other cafe. So she sends me the directions. I get the directions, and then I start driving to that cafe. Now, during that time while I'm driving, and I don't recommend this at home, but I was texting and driving a little bit, and normally I might send like one message, but I noticed that I was sending a little bit too many, and the reason was because my mom's roommate had finally made contact with me. She had a woman that lived with her, just because she didn't like being alone. She didn't like living alone. So she had a woman that rented a room from her, and so based off of that, I was like, oh, I should probably pull over, because I need to text a little bit more. This isn't going to be a quick message. And I'm looking down at my phone, and I had that little, you know how you get that queasy feeling, like, you're not supposed to be texting. And if it's a quick one, okay, you try to get away with it. But, which again, I do not recommend that. People do lose their lives from that, but I do it sometimes. But I was looking down at my phone a little bit too long, and I noticed I was distracted. So I'm already driving to this restaurant. So I pull over. I just literally make a quick right, a split-second decision. I pull over, and you can't really see where I was pulling over to, because I pulled down like a side street, and I just pulled over, and I pulled into the first driveway. And I'm still kind of looking down at my phone. I'm barely looking up. I'm still distracted. So now I'm looking down into my phone. I still don't know where I'm at. So I'm looking down, I'm just in a random driveway at my phone, and I'm texting the woman back and forth, and trying to get some things resolved with her. I look up, and I couldn't breathe for a solid 3 seconds. And I just was, my voice, I couldn't talk, nothing. It was like I don't even know how to explain this, but I look up, and I'm in the parking lot I'm in the, I'm in the parking lot for the funeral home that I was just at the day before. So I'm in the parking lot. It has this pineapple. I forget the name of the funeral home. I'm in the parking lot to where my mom's going to be taken to at the funeral home maybe in 3 hours. And I just couldn't talk. I couldn't do anything. I'm like, wow. Like, how does that happen? Like, there were so many things that had to happen to bring me there. I wasn't planning on having breakfast. I wasn't planning. If I would have went to Cracker Barrel, if I would have made that decision instead of the other one, which I wanted to go to Cracker Barrel, that was my first choice. And then Rosalva named one more. And I said, no, let's try the other one. I've been to Cracker Barrel. If I didn't do that, if I didn't get off on that exact exit, Florida's a big place. I mean, I was driving an hour. This isn't like we were in this small town or this small little main street where you're going to pass one funeral home out of 1,000 of them or hundreds of them. Like, so many things had to happen. If the Marriott if they would have taken my order and I would have just had my breakfast sandwich, which was the plan, then I wouldn't have told Roger, let's have breakfast. Like, all of the things that had to happen. And then how do you pull into a random parking lot that your mom's going to be at in a couple hours, and it happens to be the exact same funeral home that you were just at not even 24 hours ago? If you're listening to this and it's starting to get crazy, it's going to get crazier. I'm telling you, I told you we were going to start light and this happened in chronological order. But if you're pretty shocked at what I just said, which I'm shocked saying it and I'm having a hard time keeping it together to say it. Because as I'm writing this, she's still there. And I think they're going through the embalming process now over the next couple of days, as they ship before they send her to Michigan. So as I record this, all right, so I told you the stories are going to get crazier. I mean, these are just signs. I mean, my mom letting me know it's okay. We picked the right funeral home. We picked the right thing. We're doing the right thing. Like, I mean, if she has a choice in this, I mean, I don't know if she could have planned a way to I know she was very worried about me if something happened to her or when it happened. If she could have planned a way to put all these angels in my way and all these signs, then she did a heck of a job. Okay, so now after that happened, we eat breakfast, all the other good stuff. The place was amazing, by the way. Salva she picked a great place. It was delicious. Now, Roger and I the plan was, in LA, there's, plenty of people that are standing outside of Home Depots and things like that. So my plan was to go to U-Haul, get a truck, and then, go to, pick up a couple people to help, and then we knock it all out. So I go back to the home, and then when we get back to my mom's home, I say, hey, after probably like 20 minutes, I'm like, Roger, you should probably go check it out, because if we can't find anybody to help us, we're going to be in a lot of trouble, because there's a lot of stuff here. My mom was, for anybody that knew her, she was I won't say hoarder, but let's just say she had her things that she didn't throw away, and she was on the very low spectrum of hoarders, but definitely, I mean, she might have 500 blankets. And I'm not exaggerating. She had entire closets of blankets. Why or how, I don't know. I asked her roommate, I'm like, man, does it get that cold in Florida? Was my mom that cold? Like, you couldn't walk 2 to 3 feet without running into a blanket. Every chair, everything else. And so when I open up all the cabinets, I'm like, oh my gosh, another entire closet of blankets. Like, how does this happen? That might be a question for the ants. I don't know. I'm gonna leave that to the Viramontez ants, and you tell me if where that came from. Maybe that came from grandma. I don't know. But now, Roger's going to the Home Depot. I'm still packing stuff up. Roger calls me and I'm like, oh my gosh, he can't find anybody because of the hurricanes. Everybody's busy. Everybody's working. We missed them. So Roger tells me can't find them. So now he goes to another Home Depot, like 30 or 40 minutes outside of that, and he can't find them there either. So he's like, what are we going to do? I said, I'll get on Craigslist. I'm going to see if I can find somebody. Call the first mover. It's not happening. It's not happening. Call the second mover. It's not happening again. It's not happening. Oh, you know what? Before I get to that part, another interesting story. Actually, I'm going to circle back to that one. I told you I'm going to try to keep these in chronological order. So when Roger's the plan and to pick up the people from Home Depot, like when Roger did that, I was thinking, oh, I need to go to an ATM. I got to get cash because obviously they're going to take cash. They're not obviously working for a company. They're working for themselves. They're hanging out at Home Depot trying to make some extra money. So I'm like, oh, they're only going to take cash. It's not like you can hand them a credit card, right? So the first thing I think is, man, I don't know where an ATM is. I got to find an ATM. And then I remember, I'm telling you, it like pops into my head like it popped into my head like a light bulb, or like hey, check your wallet. So I look in my wallet and I have a bunch of $100 bills. Now, why do I have a bunch of $100 bills? This is insane to think about how things connect sometimes. So maybe a week before that, maybe 2 weeks before that, I don't know. A friend invited me to a horse race with one of his friends, Mark. And my first time, just so everybody knows, I don't know anything about horse races. I haven't I just don't know. I just went he was helping me. And then I interviewed somebody named Jeff, who was awesome. And he's for one of the shows, and if his interviews on the podcast too. So, and if anybody cared to listen to it, they could, obviously. But I interviewed Jeff, so between Jeff and Mark, they helped me with kind of like my strategy for the day at the horse races. Now, if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, Adam, what do the horse races have to do with your mom? Come on, get back to the story. Just chill. Wait a second. It does work. So I win. I win at the horse races, and I don't even remember I have money in my wallet. And what's interesting about that is I haven't carried paper cash in a decade. So for me to think that while I was celebrating, like winning those horse races, it was so much fun. I had so much fun at those races that cash was going to be like, it was like $500. That cash was going to be what I was going to be using to pay the movers who had moved my mom's stuff out. And that was good. That moment and that enjoyment was going to actually save me a trip to the ATM a couple of weeks later. And it's hard to express the shock when I opened up my wallet and saw all those $100 bills, because again, I don't carry cash, let alone $500 and like hundreds, and why would I ever need cash? I don't. Like, this is the only thing I could have needed cash for, and it was there. Whew. Again, if that was part of some big plan, if that was part of I don't know, but it's just interesting how like God was there and provided. Like, it's just real interesting to me that like all these little things, that pieces that fell into place to cause me some type of comfort or ease during this time, were even in place far before like I even could have imagined what I was gonna need that money for. Okay, so back to Home Depot. So Roderick's at his second Home Depot. He can't find one worker, not even one guy. Like, nobody's out there. They're all busy because the hurricane. We got there a little too late. Who knows? So I'm on Craigslist, and the first place I call, no go. It's not going to happen. The second, he refers me to another mover. I'm like, this is kind of an emergency. We got to get it done like today. Second mover, he calls another person, and finally we get some people that send us that come out. And so we had these two, it was two sons and the dad. So there's three people. So I was only going to get one or two. I was going to get somebody from Home Depot. Instead, what I got was I got a second truck. So they had their own box truck in addition to the U-Haul. I got a second truck and I got an extra person. Now, what's insane about that is everything fell into place like clockwork. If we would have gotten I'll tell you what I mean. If those two guys would have been at Home Depot, we wouldn't have finished. It ended up being a way bigger job than we thought. It did take 3 people and it took a second truck. We would have never finished. It would have taken a second day and it would have taken a whole lot more. So like that original adversity of what we thought it was, actually ended up being it ended up being another blessing, not being able to find those guys from Home Depot, because we needed a second truck and we needed another person, because it was a 5-person job, counting myself and Roger, not a 3 or 2-person job. And we needed a second truck because the donating part and the dumping part took 3 trips, and that's with a big truck. Whew. So some more, this is another small mention as we get into this, as these little small signs, these little small miracles. We dumped at the landfill, when we were dumping, and we didn't have to pay. That's the third thing on this trip that I didn't have to pay. So or I should say benefit, So the car rental upgrade, the hotel snacks and all of that good stuff. And then the landfill stuff, we didn't even have to pay the landfill deal. And so I'm just like, these were accumulating. Like, are you kidding me? Like, really? So now as we, getting back to moving and give you some more nuances to this moving story, because it's just insane. And even as I think about it, because it just happened yesterday, like the amount of things that had to go like just perfect for this to work out is just, it's a lot. So the next thing is, and I'm going to tell this part of the story just a little bit out of order, only because we're getting towards kind of the biggest miracle, in my opinion, of the entire trip. And it's kind of, I want to get some of the small ones out. So there's one other small one that I thought was just pretty insane. And it might sound silly, but I don't think so. So when I went to, when you go to rent a U-Haul, they ask you how many miles you're going to drive. And when they asked me that, how you just kind of make a snap decision, a number popped into my head and it was 50. I said 50 miles. And he says that, okay, 50 miles. I said, yep, it'll be 50 miles. And I don't know why I thought it would be 50 miles. Like I don't know when the last time I rented a U-Haul was. I just said 50 miles. So fast forwarding a bit, or just adding a little nuance to that. So it's going to be 50 miles. So some trips that were unexpected that caused us to drive those 50 miles, which that's a little bit of a spoiler on the story. But we had to go to the landfill. We weren't planning on going to the landfill. The only reason we went to the landfill was because we were, informed after the fact that we weren't able to dump some of the items we wanted to dump into the local dumpsters. So that trip wasn't planned. The other truck, they used our truck too to do a couple of small trips. That wasn't planned. So fast forwarding, just to understand that I had no potential way of knowing that I would drive 50 miles or if I would drive 50 miles or not. I just randomly guessed that number. It just kind of popped in my head. So I get to the U-Haul and the guy checks me in, and I'm like, I mean, again, one of those like my jaw-dropping moments. I drove 51 miles exactly. That whole trip, that whole thing, everything that was supposed to happen up to that point, like, to me, that was just a sign, like, again, you're doing the right thing. And I don't know if that's reaching or if that's not, or how you feel about that. But to me, like, come on, who guessed almost to the penny, like the miles? So the guy's like, he's kind of like, okay, yeah, so you said you're gonna drive 50, you drive 51. So I think he said like you owe $1.38 or something like that. And I was like, no way. I thought he was messing with me. And I'm like, no way. And he's like, what? And he just saw this smile on my face. And I was like, have you ever had anybody like that basically guessed to the mile what they were at? He stopped for a moment. He still didn't understand what I was saying. Then he's finally like, oh, I get it. Yeah, that's crazy. So anyway, let's get to the craziest one, or the biggest sign, or the biggest. Oh man. Yeah, this one's gonna be hard. But this one's important because this one was supposedly supposed to happen. So during this time, where I'm getting all these signs and all these things and all this really love from my mom, I feel, and from God, I'm sitting around and I share with certain family members. So like my cousin Gabriel, I shared with him. I shared some with the other co-founder of Mission Matters, Shirag. I shared with Roger and Rosava, of course. I shared with my cousin Gabriel, just a couple of people that I've been texting who've been kind of helping with some logistics things overall. And I might have even shared with Hillary, our managing editor, with Matt, our podcast agency director. Like I shared with a couple of people that I've been in contact with some of these stories. And while these stories are happening, Rosava's kind of in the background, and she's getting sad, and she's like, man, where are my signs? Like, why don't I see anything happening? What's going on? Why isn't Aunt Grace, which is what she called her, why isn't my Aunt Grace like giving me these signs or this or that? And I'm like, Sava, you got the bird. Come on. If you remember the beginning of this episode, the Telemundo interview of Rosava, where the bird comes down and she's like, that's my Aunt Grace. I'm like, Rosava, you got the bird. What more do you want? Are you kidding me right now? And then you got all these other signs, and she told me when we were waiting in one of the lines before, she's like, well, maybe and she's like, she wants more. Like, she's like, I want another sign. I want more. So, well, I will say, Rosava got her sign. So apparently my winnings at the horse race were not quite enough to pay the movers. I was about 100 short. So I asked Rosava, I said, hey, can you go to the ATM while we finish the moving side of things, right? And she went, and she's gone for a really long time. So she's gone like, I don't know, maybe like what seemed like an hour. And so I call her to see if she's okay. And she's like, Adam, I went to the first ATM, there was no power. I went to the second ATM, no power. I think the third ATM, no power. And finally, at the fourth ATM, she was able to pull out the cash. So the movers are basically done, and she's still taking a little bit of time. And so I'm like, I hope she's okay, everything's fine, right? So she gets back to the home, and she's like, Adam, I have some good news. And I'm like, okay, like, that's interesting. What could be good right now, right? So she tells me that she talked to she talked to the officer that was with my mom when she passed, and that he was able to speak with her. And like, he was the first one there with her, and he was with her the whole time, and she wasn't alone. So he asked to come over and talk to us when he's done with his shift. So he says he's going to come over at 7. So I don't think it quite hit me, like, until after he was there and he's in the middle of the story, like how special that is. And how, again, whether it's how God, like how my mom, like how all of this was just, it was supposed to happen. And not only that, but she's okay. Like she's okay, like where she's at. And who knows, it might even have been her reward to be taken so fast, and to not have to be in pain anymore, and to not have to deal with getting any, like, the normal things that were going to happen in her body had she been around, you know, a lot longer. So to put this in perspective, the odds of Rosava running into the officer, like to talk to him, where she ran into him, is when you first go into the community, they only let people right now go into the community that have IDs, because they obviously don't want to, many people going in there that don't belong there, like visitors and stuff like that. Just in general, they don't want a lot of people in there because they're still doing cleanup and everything else. So she's waiting in line, and there's 2 officers there, a male and a female. She just happens to get the male. Like, think about that. There's 4, 5, 6, 7 cars in front of her, whatever the amount was. And luck of the draw, if she would have been 1 car earlier, 1 car later, she might have had the female officer. If the first ATM had cash, the second ATM, the third ATM had cash, if I would have had the first movers come in, or if I would have picked up the guys from Home Depot, like, there's hundreds of things that had to happen throughout the day to lead to that one, somebody might say incidental, somebody may say serendipitous moment. To me, I would say that one divine moment, that one miracle. It's a freaking miracle. It's impossible that happened, but it did. And the guy asks her, why are you here? And if you know Rosava, then you know she's a talker. She's a talker. She'll talk to you whether you want her to talk to you. It doesn't matter. You're in an elevator at Rosava, she's gonna talk to you. And I didn't realize that, but she got that from my mom. Like, they're talkers. My mom, she'll talk to you, or she would when she was around, talk to you, no matter what. Like a stranger, anybody else. It was pretty embarrassing growing up, and now Rosava has now carried on that lineage. And Roger, her husband, talks about how it's pretty embarrassing to him. Oh, it's funny but true. So the guy, again, getting back to, she's entering the community, and as she's going into the community, the male police officer asks her why she's there. She tells him, her aunt, passed away, and he says, do you mind me asking you what her name was? And she says, Mary. And the officer says, can you pull over? And you pull over. I want to talk to you for a moment. And Sava said she could see the tears starting to come in his eyes, like he was starting to get glassy. And so she pulls over. I'm sure she didn't know what was going on at that point, but she pulls over, of course, because she wanted to talk to him. And he tells her, I was with her, and I want to tell the family, the full story. So it kind of didn't hit me until because we're still in the middle of getting stuff done, moving, all that other stuff, until he came by at 7 a.m. or 7 p.m. that same night after his shift. And we were just kind of finishing up with everything. Like, it was to explain like the mood and the air in that home is kind of tricky, because it's now pretty empty and all her stuff's done, and we're literally at the last maybe box. Like, everything's done. And the officer coming was almost like the grand finale, if you will, from the trip. And he sits down and he starts to tell us a story, and he tells us, he's been doing this for 19 years, and that this was one of the hardest thing he ever had to do. And he tells the story about how when he first came to their area, the home, the country club, I should say, like the Spanish Lakes Country Club, he was there for another call, and this was even before the tornado. So he was just there on another call. He was there to help somebody else. And he went through doing what he had to do to help them and call assistance, and they ultimately got that gentleman help. And about this time, that's when everything starts to escalate, and there's a lot of emergency responders. There's all kinds of things all around at this point. The tornadoes hadn't come yet, but they were on their way. And they're all, communicating on their radios and everything else. And he ultimately, when the tornadoes finally hit, which they first had to run from the tornadoes because they were coming their way. Then once the tornadoes were gone, let's say within, 10, 15 minutes, whatever it was, now these really, really brave individuals, the emergency responders, the firefighters, the police are now, just picture this for those out there that just don't quite get this, or that even maybe take for granted. I know I do sometimes. I'll be one of the first. I got a message the other day, or a ticket the other day, for having my cell phone in my hand in LA. And I wasn't very excited about that from that particular sheriff, right? But, so, I go back and forth, but I think now is a good time to give them some credit. Because if you can imagine, they're literally running from a tornado one way, like hauling, like going fast, all these fire trucks, everything else. And as soon as the tornado is kind of like past a bit, now they're rushing back into the scene. Like, just even to think about that is just, because they know that, so they rushed back into the scene before there were 911 calls, before anything, because they already knew. They knew there had to be devastation. And so all of these responders are rushing back into the scene. And there's no street signs. There's there's devastation. And the officer talks about when he finally gets to that street where my mom was at, and it's just pure devastation. Everything's everywhere. And he talks about when he finally was able to find my mom and to hear her, to talk to her, and that she was coherent, and that he fixed her hair, and they were trying to, wipe the hair away from her face, and he saw blood on the back of her head, and he saw her arm was pretty severed, and he saw there were about 5 of them, he said, he thinks, roughly 5 people that were trying to get the rubble off of her. And they finally reached a point to where they had the top half of her uncovered. And as they were getting to the bottom half of her, it just it got to the point to where you're trying to move a little stick and you can't move that stick. And the reason is because the entire weight, the beam, it's almost as if the whole entire mobile home flipped over and landed on her. So the beam was going right across her, like kind of crushing her. And when she was coherent and when she could talk, he was just like, Mary, I'm here with you. Don't worry, you're gonna make it. And he's trying to be, and she just responded by saying, help. And at a certain point, when they can't lift the beam or they couldn't do other things, and they're trying to get the other, like the heavier equipment in there for her because they needed it to get the beam and to try to pull her out. And while he was waiting, because it didn't look very hopeful, because from the standpoint of the emergency vehicles, it's hard to get in and out. Their location services weren't working. I mean, they're in the middle of like a war zone. This is just right after the tornado. There's people screaming in another in another park or in another one of the homes. There's a lot going on. It's dark, except for the lights, of course, from the vehicles, everything else, but there's still kind of like the environment of it's raining. And and he tells her, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. And they're trying to get the vehicle in there to try to, lift everything up and try to make that happen. And in the meantime, he puts like a board above her to keep the rain from falling on her face. Then he wipes her face. And he's just telling her, hang in there, Mary. And she just says back again, like, help. And about this time, her breathing starts to slow a little bit. And it just starts slowing down more. And then she just keeps on slowing down more. And then it goes to where she's maybe breathing every 30 seconds or so. And then finally it just stops. When the emergency vehicles get there, a short time after, he doesn't remember whether it was, obviously, again, it was chaos. He lost a little bit of perception of time for a moment, which is pretty understandable. But he just tells him, you're too late. Now, there wasn't really much they could have done. Even if they had tried to, or if they had been successful with lifting that beam, like just using like human like force and weight, like if they had all lifted or something, like the officer told me that, she was pretty bad, and if there was no emergency services there, like she could have bled out, or there's just a lot of things that could have happened that he was made aware of as well by the emergency responders once they did get there. So I feel ultimately they did the right thing and that they did their best. And I'm grateful that she wasn't alone, that she had somebody there with her to wipe her hair off her face, to cover the rain. To cover the rain from hitting her. There were a lot more details that the officer shared with us. I mean, he probably spent a solid half an hour, maybe 40 minutes telling us the details and even showing us the map and how they came in and out and what they were trying to do. But ultimately they tried their best, and this was God's plan for her. This is just the way it was supposed to be. And what I find, like, so, well, after he told that whole story, obviously everybody there's a little shocked. We all hugged, shook hands, like, and he shared with like us that, this was part of the healing that he needed, and how grateful he was that he wasn't going to be making a phone call, and that he could actually meet me as her son. And Rasava showed him pictures of her, and he said, it's funny, but he knows it's not possible, but he feels like he's seen her face before, like he just felt that connection. And whether it's true or not, my mom just had that effect on people. And I know that she wouldn't have want this officer to hurt. And I know that closure, she would be happy that he was able to receive some of that healing for his path going forward. And that we could all share that moment. The first thing I remember saying is, and this is my mom, and this is the humor, and this is like how she kind of just taught us to be by her example, is the first thing I did. The first thing I remember saying is, I look at Rasava and I'm like, Rasava, see? Does this count? Is this your sign? Or am I going to have to hear your mouth for the next 10 years about you didn't get a sign? You got the biggest sign. You got the officer that was with her. He came to see you, and you are the one that met him at the gate. You are the one that sign was given to, and that miracle was given to. So I'm like, I'm not yelling at her, but I'm in a probably, a family style, louder voice, pretty stern. And I look at Roger, and he looks kind of a little shocked, and he's going through it, of course. And we're all emotional and going through it. The officer's looking at me kind of like surprised. And Rasava's thinking about it, and she wouldn't give me an answer at first. And I'm like, no, Rasava, you're going to, this is your sign. And she pauses for a moment. She's like, yeah, that's my sign. I'm like, what more could she do, Rasava? Come on. Like, God gave you the biggest sign. You're fine. That's a little sibling rivalry, right? For anybody that has people in their lives. But after, and now now the second half of this begins, which is taking care of, all the things that have to happen and really partying in my mom's memory and celebration, and then just learning how to live without a mom, which many people have obviously are doing in their lives. But, this is my first experience losing a parent. And I'll kind of close with this. Before I started recording this video, I was looking at my hotel. Remember the one that I booked randomly? I just picked late at night, hotels tonight, whatever. Just random hotel, picked it quickly, wasn't paying attention, even picked the wrong city, right? So it happens to be a 4-minute drive from where I have to return this rental to. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. And I can take that as a coincidence, or I can say, thanks for that, thanks for that favor. Thanks for that favor, and thanks for, making this whole thing a little bit easier to bear with. And I hope that, the family that's going to listen to this, I hope that you get, you know that as a family, we'll be okay. We're gonna continue. We've been through a lot, and this is gonna take us some time, but we'll continue. We've been through a lot, and it's gonna all be okay. And for my audience, or for people that maybe are gonna listen to this that I don't know, or just fans that have been a part of the show or podcast or on the show, or my clients, or who have been extremely supportive. I mean, I've even had clients and people that have been on the show that have offered to start up a fund for my mom, which I think we're going to do. And the fund is ultimately going to be to donate money to causes and charities that she would have wanted. And I'm definitely going to be setting up a fund for her, in her memory, to honor her memory. And that was an idea by one of my clients and friends. Now I would say friends who, this will be one of the things that we're going through together. But I'm just so shocked, and just feel so blessed to have so many people around me. Some that I know, some that I don't know, some that are close, some that are family, that have just been so supportive. And, it's kind of, when I think about what makes a good life, I mean, I'm still pretty early in my life. Maybe, I don't know, maybe a tornado is going to come get me or something, which that I can't even say that with a laugh yet, but I feel like I'm going to be talking, for my listeners that'll be listening to the show for a long time, probably going to be talking about tornadoes a whole lot. It's probably going to be a thing going forward in my life, but unless a tornado comes and gets me, I'm pretty young in my life, and I feel pretty blessed to have the experiences and the people around me that support me and that are there for me in moments like this.